The Army's workhorse. That's what you could call this truly legendary all-wheel drive truck, the ZIL 131. It never knew fatigue and wasn't afraid of the mud or off-road, overcoming it to carry out the most incredible missions, tasks that only a true universal soldier of the automotive front could handle. It was used to transport soldiers, ammunition, gear, and all kinds of cargo. It towed cannons and trailers. Weapons and a wide variety of superstructures were mounted on it. The design of this truck, with its distinctive radiator grille shaped like the bony tentacles of a facehugger from the famous Hollywood Alien franchise, was impossible to lose in the general flow of vehicles. It commanded respect and became the benchmark of Soviet-style automotive military design. But was everything really perfect with this utilitarian legend of Army logistics? What flaws are actually hidden behind the famous design of the ZIL 131? We'll talk about all this in our upcoming stories. So, enjoy watching! And don't forget to share your impressions of this Tyrannosaurus of the Soviet-era Army motor pool in the comments. First all-wheel drive ZIL, designated 131, was built at the end of 1956, based on the earlier experimental model ZIL 128, which had been in development from 1954 to 1956. Like its predecessor, the ZIL 131 was built in two versions, with payload capacities of 2.5 and 3 tons. The first of these was intended to be used as an artillery tractor for towing guns and transporting ammunition. It could also tow trailers with a total weight of 3 tons. To perform these tasks, the vehicle was equipped with a short, all-metal cargo platform with low sides. The second version of the truck was a transport model and was fitted with a standard universal all-metal platform with only the rear side able to fold down. Folding benches were also installed in the bed for transporting personnel. These prototypes were equipped with an SV-type 6-cylinder gasoline engine with a displacement of 5.2 liters and an output of 126 horsepower. However, during factory testing, this power unit demonstrated insufficient efficiency and reliability. Therefore, in the second experimental series of trucks, whose payload capacity increased to 3.5 tons, new SV-type 8-cylinder engines with a displacement of 6 liters and an output of 150 horsepower were used. The new prototypes of the second series, which were built in 1958, received not only the same engine and 5-speed manual transmission as the civilian 2-axle ZIL 130, but also its cab. The representatives of the military department were nearly shocked unconscious by the design of their future truck. What they saw was far from the purely utilitarian design of a military vehicle, which was supposed to wallow in off-road mud, cross ditches and fords. In short, it was supposed to endure all the hardships of army life without complaint. One of the deputy ministers of the military ministry even voiced his dissatisfaction with what he saw. What's with this rounded panoramic windshield? And when our army mechanics have to replace this shattered masterpiece of Venetian craftsmanship somewhere out in the field, they'll be cursing every relative of the designers who thought it was a good idea to put it on a military truck. And just look at these voluminous, intricately shaped stamped front fenders and the radiator grille. How are we supposed to repair all of this in the field if it gets damaged? Sorry, but we need a truck, not for military parades in Moscow, decorated with bows and frills, but a real army all-terrain vehicle with a straightforward and clear design, like a sergeant's order. The remarks from the ministry officials in Moscow were taken into account by the ZIL design department, but not completely. The new ZIL 131 prototypes received new, more simplified, narrow trapezoidal fenders with headlights mounted on them, protected by screens. So the design of the radiator grille was also changed. It lost the distinctive stamped pattern of the civilian 130 model and instead became more minimalist and concise, but no less striking for it. As for the curved windshield, the military eventually accepted it and gave the green light for its use in production vehicles. However, in the production vehicles, it would be divided into 2 halves by a vertical line. The third experimental series of trucks was built in December 1959, and already in the following year, 1960, from January to June, the vehicles underwent the plant factory test drives, followed by equally successful state trials, after which the truck was recommended for mass production. Permission was granted, but the vehicle itself didn't reach the assembly line until 6 years later. There is a significant reason for such a delay. Since 1959, the ZIL plant had been undergoing modernization and reconstruction, which dragged on for several years. The first to go into production at the renovated plant in October 1964 was the civilian 2-axle model ZIL 130. The more complex 3-axle all-terrain vehicle ZIL 131 only entered serial production in 1966, but truly large-scale manufacturing began only in the following year, 1967. That is, from the moment the first experimental prototypes were built to the start of mass production, an incredible 11 years had passed, which, even by the standards of the Soviet auto industry, is practically an eternity. Although during all this time, the ZIL engineers were not just sitting around, they were constantly making improvements. But overall, the design of the vehicle, originating from the 50s, was no longer particularly fresh. The ZIL 131 is a 3-axle, all-wheel drive, bonneted truck equipped with a V-shaped 8-cylinder gasoline engine with a displacement of 6 liters and a power output of 150 horsepower. The transmission's manual, 5-speed. The vehicle's drivetrain also featured a 2-speed transfer case. The truck's front driving axle was engaged or disengaged automatically by an electro-pneumatic valve when the transfer case's low gear was activated. It could also be engaged manually using a toggle switch on the dashboard in the cab. The middle axle was designed as a through axle, which allowed the number of drive shafts to be reduced from 5 to 4. The vehicle also did away with the inter-axle differential. The truck's suspension is dependent and leaf-sprung, with a bogie-type setup on the middle and rear axles, and the front axle suspension features additional hydraulic shock absorbers. The ZIL 131 uses an aluminum drum-type braking system, single circuit with pneumatic actuation. All the wheels on the vehicle are single tire, equipped with a centralized air pressure control system. The truck's electrical system is 12-volt with shielded wiring. Some trucks could be equipped with a 5-ton winch, which was mounted to the reinforced front bumper and operated via a power takeoff unit. From the start of mass production, this all-wheel drive truck was mainly supplied to the Soviet Army, where it was delivered in a wide variety of modifications and soon became a truly indispensable workhorse for carrying out all sorts of tasks. During mass production, the ZIL 131 was constantly improved and equipped with new components and minor details, but its exterior design remained virtually unchanged. The development of the basic flatbed truck led to the ZIL 131V tractor units, which featured a shortened frame and a semi-automatic coupling device. The vehicle was used for towing semi-trailers on highways. A specialized high-mobility road train, the ZIL 137-167V, was also built on the basis of this tractor unit. It consisted of the ZIL 167 tractor unit, a modification of the ZIL 131V, and the ZIL 137 active semi-trailer with a hydraulic drive. Since the ZIL 131 was originally designed as a military vehicle platform, a wide variety of specialized superstructures, transport and loading vehicles, mine trawl carriers, as well as equipment for servicing airplanes and helicopters at airfields began to be mounted on its chassis. As we can see, the ZIL 131 was an extremely in-demand vehicle that found its use in almost every branch of the military. But time went on, and by the early 70s, a truck with the classic design and construction of the 50s could no longer perform its functions as effectively. There were especially many complaints about the 8-cylinder gasoline engine, which of course provided the vehicle with decent power and performance, but at the same time was excessively thirsty. When fully loaded, the truck could bring up to 50 liters of fuel per 100 kilometers. Especially under experimental conditions, this figure increased even more. Of course, in the realities of a state-planned economy with a fairly good supply of oil resources and affordable gasoline, the situation didn't seem so critical. They tried to find a solution by converting as many trucks as possible to diesel engines. In the mid-70s, mass production began of the new cab-over-Kamaz, equipped with an economical diesel engine. They also tried to equip the ZIL 131 with their own diesel engines, but things never went beyond small batch production of a few modifications. At the end of the 70s, there was even an attempt to build a modernized ZIL 131M equipped with a multi-fuel V8 engine producing 170 horsepower. But in the end, it all came down to just a few experimental trucks with extended hoods and modified radiator grills. So the all-terrain vehicle continued to use its original gasoline engine. In 1986, the factory began producing an updated version of the ZIL 131N truck, which received a more economically modernized V8 engine and an increased off-road payload capacity of up to 3 tons 750 kilograms. The modernized version differed from previous vehicles by its headlights, turn signals, and a tarp borrowed from Kamaz. These upgraded vehicles were in high demand both in the USSR and in the armies of the socialist bloc countries. During its time on the assembly line, the Likhachev Plant's all-terrain vehicle was supplied not only to the military, but also to the civilian national economy. This was a specialized, simplified truck. the ZIL 131A, which lacked additional military equipment such as shielded electrical wiring. Several experimental dump trucks, designated with the letter C, were even built on the ZIL chassis. However, these vehicles never went into mass production and were used only for the plant's own needs. After the collapse of the Socialist bloc and the USSR, the Cold War ended and processes of disarmament and army reduction began. The new military trucks turned out to be unnecessary for anyone. Most of the ZIL 131s coming off the assembly line simply piled up in the factory yards in Moscow. The army also didn't know what to do with the large number of trucks stored at military bases. Eventually, they were simply written off. Some were scrapped for metal, and those that were in decent technical condition and kept in storage were sent to the civilian automotive market. Due to the drop in demand for outdated trucks, the ZIL factory stopped producing the 131 model in 1994. But the story of the ZIL 131 didn't end there. Production of this truck continued for about 8 more years at the Ural Automotive Plant and only stopped in 2002. In total, about 1 million ZIL 131 vehicles rolled off the assembly line at the Moscow plant. Thus, this model became the most widely produced all-wheel drive truck in the Soviet Army. Today, you can still spot this dinosaur of the Soviet auto industry somewhere on the roads or off-road, no longer as lively, but still with its unchanged military-style standard carried through the decades.